All right, we are gonna do this. Welcome back, YouTubers. Inland Northwest Native News. I'm your host, Jeff Ferguson, and we have got a lot of stuff here. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't been here before, we appreciate it. If you'd like to follow and keep up with us on YouTube, you can hit the red subscribe button down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. It's a way to keep up with us, just like following somebody on Twitter or on Facebook. If you like what you see, be sure to click the little blue thumbs up down in your left-hand corner. And we are here to enlighten you and keep you up to date on news and events on 11 tribes throughout the inland Northwest and all the native communities within them. We're based in Spokane, Washington, and we're putting on weekly episodes of what's going on in the inland Northwest here, along with midweek updates and a few other things that we're throwing in there kind of at random. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the comment section listed below and let us know. If you have any tips or new suggestions, be sure to let us know about that too. If you know somebody that you think we should interview, somebody that you think is a positive Native role model, we'd like to hear from you too. You know, an elder, maybe an academic or an athlete, or somebody you think that's making a positive difference in Indian country. Let us know. I just wanted to, I wasn't even planning on doing midweek updates, but man, stuff happens so fast. My weekly episodes would be 2 hours long if I don't try to squeeze some stuff in, and we had some amazing stuff happen just this earlier this week already. So I'm going to get going. A couple announcements real quick here. First, out at Wellpinit, we have the Evergreen Tree Medicine. This will be April 29th at 5 p.m. with a dinner, and it's hosted by Melody Wynn, and this is also a project by the Spokane Tribal Network. So if you can't make it out for one. We also have a summer program here for the Native Project, and this will be going from July 8th to August 2nd. For information, contact nativeproject.org. Registration opens April 29th, and it costs 40 bones a kid. So space is limited to 65 spots only. I know they fill up every year, so you want to get in early on that one. All right, so we have the Keller Rodeo coming up first weekend in May. Second weekend in May, we have the SKC PowWow. The third weekend in May, we have SFCC Red Nations PowWow, and the last weekend in May, the 24th, 25th, and 26th is the Arrow Lakes PowWow. So be sure to check those out. Moving right along. So Warm Springs, you can drink your water again. We have a boil water notice lifted. Consumption of treated water can resume in impacted communities in Warm Springs. As of April 24th at 2:30 p.m., the boil water notice of the Warm Springs water treatment plant has been lifted. So you're good to go there. So man. Moving right along, we have a lot of really cool things that happen. But one thing I want to talk about before primary, more than anything, yesterday, Washington State, Governor Jay Inslee, he signed the Missing Indigenous Women's Bill. So here we go. The one thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is, oh man, all of this stuff has been piling out. Look at all this stuff. This is just in like 3 days for the Inland Northwest on a national level, regionally, and locally here too. I'm going to kind of whip through this stuff as quickly as I can. But moving right along, right into national news. Missing Indigenous women spotlighted as bill signed. Now, I said national, but this is as local as it gets. Governor Jay Inslee, yesterday, April 24th, he signed this bill. A bill responding to cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women has been signed into law by Governor Jay Inslee. This is an Associated Press article, and it's published at 7:37 p.m. yesterday. And I wanted to do this last night, but man, I had so much other stuff in here. It was getting crazy, so I wasn't going to be able to get to it before I started falling asleep. So anyhow, I apologize for that. Washington Governor Jay Inslee, lower right, signs a bill into law Wednesday, April 24th at Capitol in Washington. The bill creates liaison position for the Washington State Patrol and requires the agency to develop best practices in hopes of reducing disappropriation rates of violence faced by Native American and Indigenous women, and also the frequency with which perpetrators of the crimes avoid justice. Amazing. That's so fast. Went through the House, went through the Senate, bam, on the governor's desk, he signed it. Thank you again, Governor Inslee. A positive thing for Indian country. Thank you for helping to watch out for our missing and murdered Indigenous women, our missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. The article goes on to state, with sometimes marginalized victims slipping between jurisdictional cracks, a growing number of missing and murdered Indigenous women are the enigmatic focus of a Washington bill signed into law Wednesday. Taking aim at jurisdictional confusion and other factors, the bill creates a pair of liaison positions within the State Patrol and requires the agency to develop best practices for handling the cases. If you don't remember, I covered this back in episode 3, so be sure to check that out. I'm going to leave links for everything that I'm talking about in the description below. So again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to respond. Washington Governor Jay Inslee signed the bill in a brief ceremony at the state capitol, accompanied by banging drums and a loud cheer. It also requires training for the state police in government relations with tribes. The measure comes amid growing national awareness of the disproportionate rates of violence, including sexual assault and rape, that Native American women face nationally, and also particularly of the indigenous women going missing. This is not a Washington problem, it's a nationwide problem, said Gina Mossbrucker, the Goldendale Republican who sponsored the bill after the signing. It breaks my heart, not just for the family members, but that we didn't do something long ago. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sponsoring that, Gina Mossbrucker. We really appreciate it. And thank you again, Governor Inslee, for being on the side of Indian country. We really appreciate it. Moving right along, we had some announcements in Montana. This is great. So this came out of Native Business Staff, U.S. Senator Jon Tester. He announced $26 million in grant money for funding to Montana tribes. This is a great article. If you want to catch this one, the link's in the description section below. I'm just going to read a little bit. U.S. Senator Jon Tester announced that Montana's tribes have been awarded more than $26 million in grant funding to bolster affordable housing in Indian country. $26 million. That's great. All Montanans should have a place to call home, but far too many in Indian country struggle to find one, Tester said. These resources will give tribes a much-needed boost to their housing initiatives, allowing them to provide more folks with safe, affordable places to live. The grants are awarded under the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996 through the Department of Housing and Urban Development for the development and operations of low-income housing. All right, the grant awards go like this to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, $4.8 million, Blackfeet tribe, $6.5 million, the Chippewa Cree, $2.5 million, Crow tribe, $2.2 million, Fort Belknap, $2.1 million, the Fort Peck Assiniboine and Sioux tribes, $5.1 million, and the Northern Cheyenne tribes, $2.8 million. Tester has long supported the development of affordable housing in Indian country. Earlier this year, he played a key role in negotiating a budget deal that invested millions into tribal housing initiatives. He also introduced the Tribal HUD VASH Act to provide rental and housing assistance to homeless and at-risk Native American veterans. Thank you once again, Governor Jay Inslee and Senator Tester. All right, moving right along. Here's something up Inchalim Way. This I thought was just crazy. 2 years after major road washout, Inchalim Highway still unpassable. By Eric Robinson. 2 years later, the Inchalim Highway is still unusable. Inchalim, Washington. In April 2017, Ferry County was plagued by road washouts. A large portion of the Inchalim Highway collapsed as a result, blocking the main access into town. Now, 2 years later, the highway still remains unusable. A photo taken Tuesday showed the uneven road still blocked off with signs. A separate access road was set up to allow residents access into town. Again, the links to this will be in the comment section. This is an article. It was actually on KXLY.com. So moving right along, NBC on a national level. This is something that affects all of Indian country, but it's not just an Indian country problem. Indian people have been affected far more disproportionately than any other ethnicity in the United States. There actually were studies that have shown that Indian country was targeted by Big Pharma, so this means a lot to us. This came out on April 23rd on NBC News. First major drug distribution company, former executives criminally charged in opioid crisis. Our office will do everything in its power to combat this epidemic, from street-level dealers to the executives who illegally distribute drugs from their boardrooms. Now that is some positive movement. Our office will do everything in its power to combat this epidemic, from the street-level dealers to the executives who illegally distribute drugs from their boardroom. This is by Tom Winter and Alicia Fieldstadt. International first in the fight against the opioid crisis, a major drug distribution company, its former chief executive, and another top executive have been criminally charged in New York. Rochester Drug Cooperative, one of the top 10 largest drug distributors in the United States, was charged Tuesday with conspiracy to violate narcotics laws, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., and willfully failing to file suspicious order reports. So they're charging these guys for not keeping up with the paperwork and not keeping up with suspicious behavior. by people that were prescribing the drugs and the mass distribution, because they are supposed to be regulating this and watching it closely so the distribution of these drugs didn't get out of hand, which at this point is way out of hand. So we have an attorney here in Indian country, Autumn Don Monto, and a firm called Skikos that's leading a civil lawsuit against Big Pharma and to help with the opioid crisis. If you're interested, I'm going to leave a contact information in the description below. So be sure to follow up on that, especially if that's something that you think that you could be a part of. Be sure to check out. Moving right along. So this is something that's only taken forever. Oh my gosh. Desert news in Utah. Utah utility crews bring electricity to Navajo homes by John Holmquist. This is in Coppermine, Arizona, published April 21st. After a recent snowstorm, thousands of Utahns face the frustration of living without electricity for a few hours, but imagine living like that all the time, all your life. That happens to be the case for about 60,000 people near the Utah-Arizona border. Now utility crews from Utah are volunteering to help out. I do feel a pretty big sense of pride coming down here and helping these guys out, sharing my skills with them and bettering their lives, said Brad Fryer of Heber, Utah, Light and Power. That's just great. It's about time. You know, holy cow, these guys have been without electricity. We are in the 21st century. This is America. We are in the 21st century. Holy cow, this is crazy. I can't even believe it. 60,000 people. So we have we are in the 21st century, and now they're catching up. But that's, you know, it's a great positive movement in Indian country. This is going to affect these people's lives perpetually for generations. The people in question live on the Navajo Nation, typically in isolated homes scattered across the vast reservation. Utility trucks from Heber City had a daunting experience just getting there over many miles of bad road. Deep sand in the Navajo Nation forced them to stop several times. Eventually, they made it to the home of Sid Wall, a relatively new and modern structure that had never been connected to the electrical grid that nearly all Americans take for granted. His daughter grew up without electricity. It's been a long wait, Shelby Wall said. So I'm now 21, and it's been 21 years. For her mother, Marlene Yazzie, it's been much longer. It's been like, how old am I? 48. Ha ha. That's how many years. Heber City and 23 other cities across the country are sending utility crews to finally provide electrical connection to isolated Navajo homes. Typically, such a project can be prohibitively expensive because power lines are often quite distant from homes. But that's a great move. That may not be directly related to us here in the Inland Northwest, but it's a great move in the right direction. If we can get more power companies and more cities on board, maybe we can get some more power lines, and maybe we could, it's a move to help get some high-speed internet to some of our rural reservations out here in the Inland Northwest. Moving right along. High country news. The Blackfeet Nation is trying to open its own national park. Members of the Blackfeet Nation want tourists to understand how the story of Glacier National Park is really the story of their nation. This is by Samantha Weber. It's submitted April 23, 2019. In 1992, Ed Desrosier wanted to offer visitors to Glacier National Park an experience that didn't yet exist. Tourists learned about the park's wildlife and the history of the iconic red tour buses that carried them to the park's most breathtaking views, but the stories of the people who were connected to the land centuries before it became a tourist destination were not mentioned. So Desrosier, an enrolled member of the Blackfeet Nation in northwestern Montana, made it happen. But before he could become one of the few indigenous people in the country licensed to operate a tour business in a national park, he would be arrested and have to fight in court for the right to tell the stories of his people and their home. Oh my gosh, what a story. There's links to that in the description section below, but what a story. Getting arrested and having to fight to give tours to tell the story of the land and the people that have inhabited that land for thousands of years. Oh, gosh. Anyhow, moving right along. Dallas Goldtooth holds banks accountable for financing climate chaos and violating indigenous rights. This is April 22nd, 2019. There's a whole article here. As millions celebrate Earth Day around the globe, we speak with organizer Dallas Goldtooth about indigenous-led anti-pipeline activists in the United States. President Trump signed 2 executive orders earlier this month to facilitate the approval of pipeline projects at a federal level, limiting states' ability to regulate such pipelines. The move is intended in part to clear the way for permitting on the northeastern Constitution Pipeline, which is stalled after New York invoked the Clean Water Act to reject the project on environmental grounds. This comes as climate activists have filed a federal lawsuit with the ACLU challenging 3 South Dakota laws that they say violate the First Amendment rights of anti-pipeline organizers. Dallas Goldtooth is one of the plaintiffs in the ACLU lawsuit and an organizer with Indigenous Environmental. So Dallas Goldtooth is one of the plaintiffs in this ACLU lawsuit that goes on to talk about the Clean Water Act, what Trump's impact has been, and the Keystone XL pipeline and Enbridge Line 3. It's a great article. It's a long one. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but you got to check it out. So here's a great one. Again, back on a national level, more than 60 cities and states in the U.S. no longer observe Columbus Day. So this came out of CNN, and this is A.J. Willingham updated on Monday, April 22nd. So, Columbus Day has been a political lightning rod for states, cities, and municipalities around the United States for years now. Most recently, Vermont and Maine joined the small contingency of states that have renamed the October holiday to Indigenous Peoples Day to recognize the native populations that were displaced and disseminated after Christopher Columbus and other European explorers reached the continent. Technically, Columbus Day is a federal holiday, which means it is recognized by the U.S. government and thus brings the closure of non-essential government offices and usually places like post offices and banks. Currently, the states that observe Indigenous Peoples Day are Vermont, Maine, New Mexico, Alaska, South Dakota, Hawaii, and the only one in the inland Northwest is Oregon. So, the inland Northwest cities that recognize Indigenous Peoples Day are Moscow, Idaho, Bozeman, Montana, and Spokane, Washington. Other Northwest cities include Olympia, Washington, and Bainbridge, Washington. So what this means is it leaves out Missoula, it leaves out Seattle, and it leaves out Portland. So I think we can push a little bit harder towards that and hopefully have some movement on that before October. So that was just kind of an update I wanted to throw in there. A couple more stories here. Keystone XL Pipeline must comply with treaties and tribal law by NARF, the Native American Rights Fund. This is April 25th, 2019, Boulder, Colorado. On April 23rd, 2019, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe in Fort Belknap Indian Community, represented by the Native American Rights Fund, filed an amended complaint against TransCanada and President Trump over the handling of the Keystone XL pipeline. In addition to extensive violations of law outlined in the original complaint, the new complaint raises the following issues. Maps released by TransCanada show the pipeline corridor and access roads crossing Rosebud territory, some of which is held in trust, as well as Rosebud's Mini-Wachoni water system. The 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie and other federal laws requires Rosebud consent to cross Rosebud territory. Rosebud has land use, environmental, and utilities codes that apply, and TransCanada must comply with Rosebud law on Rosebud land. TransCanada agreed to abide by tribal law. Fort Belknap has a Cultural Property Act that applies to the pipeline. TransCanada failed to comply with Rosebud and Fort Belknap law. New climate change information requires a new environmental impact analysis. Recent governmental reports contain new data about climate change, which necessitates new analysis. And the federal government violated the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie and 1855 Lame Bull Treaty, in which the U.S. committed to protect against future harm to the tribe's natural resources. The U.S. did not adequately review the pipeline's proposed route and whether it crosses tribal territory. The federal government must examine potential impacts on the safety and welfare of Native people, especially women and children. An influx of itinerant workers like those required for pipeline man camps correlates with increased sexual assaults, domestic violence, and sexual trafficking. The federal government has a treaty obligation to protect tribal citizens likely to suffer increased rates of violence and abuse. So it's the same kind of stuff that they had going on in that film Wind River. So that's one of the things that is in violation of this treaty. So that's what they're talking about. There's a map on here that shows the route of the proposed pipeline. There's a link to this in the description below. All right, moving right along. In Idaho, we have Representative Simpson fighting for salmon. I want salmon back in Idaho. Simpson seeks bold action after $16 billion spent on recovery. This is an update from April 24, 2019 in the Spokesman Review by Cynthia Sewell, Idaho statesman. Last year, Idaho U.S. Representative Mike Simpson and some of his staff went to Marsh Creek, the headwaters of the Middle Fork Salmon River, to watch a returning salmon create its red, or nest, lay its eggs, and die. She swam 900 miles to get back to Marsh Creek. all to lay our eggs for the next generation of salmon, Simpson said Tuesday in his keynote speech during the Andrews Center Environmental Conference on Salmon, Energy, Agriculture, and Community at Boise State University. It was the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new one, Simpson said. These are the most incredible creatures I think that God has created. It's a cycle God created. But Simpson lamented they saw only one salmon. You got to ask yourself, he said, after spending $16 billion on salmon recovery over the last how many years? Is it working? It isn't, Simpson said. All of Idaho's salmon runs are either threatened or endangered. Look at the number of returning salmon, and the trend line is not going up, it's going down. The salmon recovery efforts that we have engaged in have probably kept the salmon off the extinction list, he said, but we should not manage just to keep these salmon off the extinction list. We should manage them to bring back a healthy, sustainable population in Idaho. And then Simpson, who just spent 15 years wrangling and shepherding to get the Boulder White Clouds declared a federally designated wilderness, made a new vow. I'm going to stay alive long enough to see salmon return to healthy populations in Idaho, he said. Wow, what a bold statement. Thank you so much for your help in salmon restoration, Representative Simpson. We need it. All the tribes in Idaho and throughout the inland Northwest need as much help as we can get to bring our sacred fish back. Thank you once again for trying to move this forward. The salmon are something that have been sacred to the indigenous people of these lands since time immemorial, and we're losing them. Fawn Sharp, president of the Quinault Nation, spoke at the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Winter Convention in Portland, Oregon, back in February, and she stated that their salmon runs that used to have numbers into the millions has been dwindled down to about 2,500. Our salmon are endangered. Our orcas are endangered. Our animals are endangered. Our environment's endangered. Our water, our air, our land is all endangered. Our children, with the threats to ICWA, are endangered. That's why we have to stand together as Indian people with our indigenous communities and with our non-native allies to fight all day, every day to maintain the rights of our people and our children and our children's children. Thank you once again for joining us. This was the midweek update. Join us for our 4th episode coming out Monday. It'll have highlights from this next coming weekend. We've got something real special planned for you in episode 4, so be sure to check it out. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And please feel free to email us or message us or whatever it takes. Let us know what you want to see. Do you like more powwow videos? Do you want more interviews? Do you want tribal elders? Do you want national news, local news? What do you want to hear? Because that's what we're here for. We're here to inform you on the issues that face indigenous people of the inland Northwest. We want to know. We can't do this without you. So thank you once again for tuning in and checking us out. Be sure to like and subscribe. And check out the Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Thanks again.